Hello, everybody, and welcome to this recording at New View Safety Coach. Today, we've got a different one. We're going to be talking to two gentlemen who co-founded a company called Open Change. That's Rob and Daniel. And they'll be hosting an event in Queensland, Australia, with one of our channel partners, HopLab. So we thought we'd bring them on, talk about why they're coming over, what their organization does, and how they go about doing it. So we can look at the benefits of what they do. So, brief intro for the gentlemen before they come on. Rob Cousins, co-founder of Open Change, as I mentioned, the organization coming over, with Daniel Hummerdle. Over the years, he has been a leader of Arctic expeditions, an insurance manager, government policy consultant, and innovation specialist. He's been self-employed, public servant, and employed in large corporations. Rob has an unquestionable thirst for adventure, knowledge, and impact, and I'm sure you'll agree with that statement when you meet him. Daniel Hummerdle he's the other co-founder for Open Change with Rob. Daniel has a unique background, having started his career as a pilot before retraining as a psychologist. His work highlights include Head of Innovation and Partnership with WorkSafe New Zealand, where I believe he met Rob, and they worked together. Director of Innovation at Art of Work, and an accident investigator in Sweden. He has vast experience in developing new approaches to improving performance in work environments, which he brings to his role at Open Change. So in summary, Daniel and Rob, co-founders Open Change, New Zealand-based agency focused on supporting organizational change and innovation through people-centric, strengths-based approaches, and that's important. We're going to keep on coming back to this people-centric side of things. They leverage their unique backgrounds and experience in order to be able to do this. So let's bring to the stage Daniel and Rob. And this is our first time we've had two guests on at the same time. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, David.
Hey, thanks, David.
No worries at all. For those of you eagle-eyed viewers, you'll notice that Rob's on mute. That's because Rob and Daniel are in the same room. And when Rob's not muted, we get the vicious loop of echo-ness, and it just destroys everything. So, hopefully we'll be able to hear Rob and everything that he's saying on there. Gentlemen, why don't you give us an overview as to what Open Change is and why you created it? Throwing that out there to either one of you that wants to jump in and.
All right.
When you're in the same room, you can have an arm wrestle for deciding who goes first.
No, I'll jump in and Rob can correct me. The idea of Open Change is a bit like open innovation or open source. It's really to open up change. A lot of change has traditionally been done to people. It's done by someone higher up the hierarchy of an organization who has a vision and try to sell that to people and get people to follow, which is, of course, one way to bring about change, and it works to some degree. It's not hugely successful. We believe, and we have developed processes to engage much broader groups of people, to really open up change, to get everyone to talk about what kind of future do they envision, what kind of future is desirable to them, and distill that vision that sits between people, a positive vision that people can see themselves in, is what we're talking about. And then helping them to start taking the very first steps towards making that vision become real here and now. So that is what we do. We do it mostly around health and safety, but we're not limited to doing it around that topic alone. But we can go for any organizational topic. We can do this at a national scale or an organizational scale or a team scale. So there's all kinds of approaches and tweaks that we can do in the way we run these events.
So the scalability that you're talking about as well came to mind. The scalability is literally from the individual all the way up to the organizational level. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The individual is more of a sort of a coaching activity.
Yep.
Where as soon as you start having two or more people, you need to tease out and get a dialogue going between people to see what sits between them. Really.
Yeah. Rob, what did Daniel miss out? He must have missed something.
Well, I'd answer your question by starting with a story, really, Dave.
Yeah.
One of the many years ago when I was running those Arctic trips, we had a critical risk management plan that was developed in London but delivered by us on an ice sheet in the Arctic. And one of the things was, well, there's polar bears up there, so we all need to carry rifles. And everybody in the group needs to be able to use it so that if a polar bear starts charging at you, whoever is around could shoot the thing. And that kind of made sense, right? But when we were there, and we took our group of like young adults, like 19, 20-year-olds, up to the rifle range just to teach them how to use a rifle. And I remember putting this rifle it wasn't even in the hands, it was in the arms of this young lady. She was like, what, 19? And she cried. Like she'd never been around something that was so powerful and might kill you. And in that moment, I thought, this whole thing about everyone using a gun, this is doomed, isn't it? I'd probably feel more scared with her being responsible for that thing, trying to teach her everything she needed to know. And if there was a bear charging at her, would she even be able to sort of hold herself together? I just felt doomed.
Yeah.
So we made this sort of choice that we weren't going to do it that way. We were going to figure out a different way, which is quite easy to do. But in that moment, when you start essentially breaking the rules, we were making an improvement to something, making it run better, but we were sort of carrying that responsibility of not doing things the way that they should be done. We couldn't really communicate with London to say what we were doing, because sort of communications were only really sort of weakly and difficult with that. And it always sort of sat with me, particularly in the safety world, about how hard it can be to do the right thing. But where the right thing exists, or the decision about that is usually in the people that are trying to complete a task or an undertaking. But how hard is it for us to be able to do that? We can say that we want about highly engaged people making good decisions, but the actual act of going against the rule or trying to improve something is really hard to follow through. So there's this, I guess, sense in me about getting the best out of people, really, and creating the conditions to do that. And many organizations will say that people are the greatest asset, but they also don't realize the amount of barriers that they put in the way for their people to do a really good job. You could just pick up a company's policies and procedures and just see how limiting they are. Like, if I'm going to think out of the box, how do I do that with these procedures? Because they usually try to push you into doing something in a consistent way. Or the audit that comes around and checks up on everything that you're doing and understanding why on earth are you doing that? Which actually sort of undermines improving things, undermines that sense of a person being the best place to make a good decision about what they do and being set up to succeed. And so I think for me, open change is about connecting with that power that is in people to create the improvements that we want to see in organizations. Sometimes that's about having a sort of social power amongst a group of us think that this is a good thing to be doing. Sometimes it's about addressing problems that we all experience, but that no one really owns. Short-termism in supply chains is something like that. We're all busy being victims of it. Instead, no one organization can step back and say we want to do this differently. You need people to come together to choose to do that. And so for me, open change is really, I guess, connecting with that agency and that power and having a robust process around it so that you can actually create meaningful improvements. You can have a variety of approaches to things. Changes make sense, and we trust our people to make good ones, and because we've set them up to go well.
Yeah, right. And I like that, the time that we spoke a couple of weeks ago. What's that noise, by the way? I can hear. It sounds like a duck or something quacking every once in a while. What is it?
The fan on my laptop is going downhill. And,
that's what it is. Gotcha. Now I've heard it, I can't unhear it, and it's always there. When we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and you were giving this outline as to what open change does and why you do it, and it's just to get back to what you were talking about then. It's it's that empowerment piece, isn't it, for the individual and for the individuals within the organization. And if you empower enough people and you give them enough credibility and enough capability and enough resilience, build the resilience within them, that has an accumulative effect on the organization. And that's one of the ways, or one of the best ways, I think, of actually getting a resilient organization, is making the individuals and making the people resilient within the organization as well. And then you from a coaching perspective, which is the perspective that I'm taking on this, that's exactly what I want to do for my clients as well, which is say, look, okay, you've got these capabilities, you've got these strengths. How do we align them with what is required from you in the organization? What do you need to change? What might that look like? How are you going to achieve that? And what do you need in order to make those changes as well? So that was a really powerful piece I picked up from our conversation the other week as well. So I just wanted to loop back in on that. Why don't we bring up, so we can talk about, so you're both coming over to Queensland, as I mentioned. You're coming over with Southbank International Hub Lab to do a workshop. I believe is this the first one outside of New Zealand?
Yeah, it is.
Right. Okay. This is the web page. Why don't we have a bit of a brief discussion about what people can expect when they come to the workshop? Yeah.
We start these days by essentially asking people to talk about the change that they want to see when it comes to health and safety. We ask them to envision, imagine that they finally arrive into this state of being that they're working towards. What is happening in that situation? Who is talking to whom? Who's making a decision? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What is it that you're proud of? And then we ask people to start sharing that with each other. And that's a really powerful moment for a number of reasons. Partly because it's just, you get you're connecting more inwards with yourself, but you also start sharing something of yourself, and people realize that they actually have a shared dream, or they have a shared vision of the future. So far, we've done this 4 or 5 times now. No one has sort of come up with an aspect of the dream that doesn't fit in with the others. They're all holding pieces of the puzzle. That they can add to it, which is about having a long-term focus, a much more human-centric focus, and more of a learning or continuous improvement approach to things, and doing things with care as a basis rather than compliance as a basis, as a reason for doing things. It's really quite beautiful. And then we start talking about, okay, what's stopping you? What's stopping you from going after these things? And normally we get a long list of excuses that people have, which is, I don't have permission, I don't have money, I don't have enough time in the day to prioritize this thing. We're fine, but the client doesn't want this, or the subcontractors are not mature enough. You can hear how predictable this list is, really. So we then start talking about micro experiments as a way to give life to this big grand vision that people have. Just take a snippet of this vision and introduce it into a aspect of the world that you're currently sitting on. Right? So maybe you can look at the way you run health and safety committees, and you introduce a sort of something that you believe in into the way you run those, and just test it out. Is it actually improving the way we run health and safety committees by doing it differently?
Yeah.
So we're telling people that, actually, getting to that big vision, there's going to be thousands of steps, but the first step is tiny, it's small, and it's easy to do, and it's fun and interesting and meaningful to do. So if we can do this collaboratively in terms of sort of sharing what we're doing and learning with each other. So imagine you have 10 people, they're all working on health and safety committees for the sake of argument. They can learn in parallel, or they can take different aspects of the vision and start sharing with each other. And that way you get sort of a mass agent change movement building towards this vision of zigzagging through uncertainty and learning together as a core. That is what we want to achieve with these things. So we teach people, we connect them with themselves and with each other around the vision. We give them some tools to build some capability to start working towards it. And then we build a community, which is people in the session itself, but also we try to connect them up with the other sessions, the participants from the other sessions that we run before. So while this is an event on one day, it is more of a gateway into a collaboration that goes on for as long as you're interested, and people step in and out of this depending on how much capacity they have to be involved.
Yeah. I know that's something we spoke about as well a couple of weeks ago, and that was a particular thing that stuck with me as well, because these types of journeys that you're talking about for individuals and especially for organizations, they're not easy, and it's not missed on me the fact that we're asking people to sometimes fundamentally change how they approach problems and how they approach work life and how they view themselves within those contexts. So that support mechanism that you mentioned, that platform, and we'll talk about that in a bit later on, if you like, that for me is a huge support mechanism for those people to actually get involved, to get the momentum, to get the enthusiasm, to get the motivation to actually go forward and start making these changes as well. And it's also not lost to me as well, this, and I'm sure you're aware of it as well, this whole micro experiment aspect of things, starting small in order to get big. That's been a primary focus for implementing HOP and other new view safety methodologies over the years, starting small within a small section of the organization and sampling it, and then letting the people who can see the benefits create a pull towards that, as opposed to the organization trying to push this onto the people the whole time. Is that where your alignment with Hop Lab and Southpack International comes from with regards to the synergy between those two approaches?
I'm looking at Rob. It's just your turn, yeah.
He's kicking you under the table, Rob. He's like, come on, Rob.
I mean, if you want change to last, the worst thing to do is to sort of start telling people what they need to do and how to go about things. You really need to get people to bring themselves to it, buy into it on their own terms. And in that way, changes, they grow at the speed of trust. And these sort of micro experiments let people make sense of an issue in the way that they want to. One of the examples that we were looking at the site-specific risk assessments and how frustrating they are for everybody. They're boring, they're tick boxy, they don't really reflect what happens over the course of the day. So, it's hard for people to engage in them or really sort of care about them. And then we start, hammering down on the compliance side of things. This is really important to do. And just through one of our micro experiment sessions, we started to think about how we wish things were, or the way that things would be if everything was running really, really well. And we ended up reimagining them as like a uncertainty preparedness session, a discussion about how people might deal with the things that will crop up throughout the course of the day, and how we're going to manage those things. Followed up by a learning thing at the end of the day, what went well, what didn't.
Yep.
And I guess those are ways of bringing people or workers or the people that are affected into what's happening to them and giving them control about the things that affect them. And you might have to start that super small just to get the buy-in. Even if we started doing that with 3 people once for a morning, at least that starts to get people thinking about what this might be. Those sort of smaller steps build trust in the idea, and they no longer rely on your sort of gravitas to sort of push something through or something like that. You get to build solutions that make sense to people. And I guess that's where, if you think about HOP and the human side of performance, this is what you're really tapping into for those things. There are the sort of 5 HOP principles, and I think if you sort of think about what those principles are, this sort of micro experiment, start small and grow at the speed of trust, is an example of bringing those principles to life in a practical way.
I really like that. Start small and grow at the speed of trust. I might steal that off you, Rob. Do you have that trademark? Do you have the copyright?
That's Cormac Russell. He's an Irish psychologist, really by trade, but he's into asset-based community development, and not so much assets in the way you think about them commercially, but assets as in something of value that people have. That might be technical knowledge, it might be experience and wisdom. It might be a physical, tangible thing. It might be a network of people, for example. But when you think about those things all being available to you to create change, it sort of throws the net a little bit wider than just a technical discipline. Which one you're going to choose? It's really into the way that people are choosing to relate to a subject, because you can bring the richness of your experience.
Yes.
Which is whenever you talk to workers, they've always got a rich past of things that they've done, problems that they've solved, knowledge that they've had. But when we were at WorkSafe, you talk to the inspectors, and there were mental health nurses in there. There were sort of construction managers. There were builders. There were all sorts of people that, if you just tap into all of their knowledge, you'd start to be able to create really compelling propositions for the organisation to look at. But only once you've nurtured people to offer it to you, to offer that wisdom.
Yeah. No, I like that. But I'm still going to steal that line, by the way. It's gone now. And before you can do anything, it's going to be the patent office or the trademark office, and you're going to be like, "Oh, he beat me to it. He beat me to." I might actually call the video. That's a really nice thing. I might call the video. Start small and advance at the speed of trust. I quite like that.
I think that Stephen Covey, is that? I'm pretty sure. I'll have a look at it.
From the 7 Habits of Effective People.
One of those books, yeah.
But I think this is part of the community side of the Safety Recrafted event that we're putting forward and trying to welcome people into, though, is like a lot of the health and safety events that I've sort of been to and seen over the years. The best ones have built-in time just for people to network and schmooze and meet and talk, because we never get enough time to do it in our day jobs. We're too busy running around doing our tasks and activities for, our managers or organizations, and to meet with your peers and actually have time to sort of step back and go, mental health and well-being, what's that for you? To explore and unpack that. And the idea of this community and this sort of platform really is trying to create more opportunities for people to be able to bump into each other, even virtually, and ask questions for help and support that they need. Because they're not always technical things, are they? It's not always, I need a run sheet for a learning teams or something like that. It's sometimes, how do I get buy-in from my supervisor to do something? I've got so many priorities being put on top of me. How do I create space so that I could do something that I need to do for me? These are organizational dynamics stuff. And I think the community platform that we're trying to use and advocate for here is a place where you can just put a shout out for something that you need. We've had people on there saying, I've got a 4-year health and safety strategy to do for my organization. Has anyone done one of these and give me some places to start? That's all you need. You don't need a big discussion on it. You can, just sort of find someone who can help you with that. We've had who's adapted learning teams, and what are the things I should pay attention to? Discussions about different health and safety apps for managing compliance, what's useful and what's not. And then we've had some sort of broader conversations. Who's interested in AI? And there's a little community of people that keep posting up all these articles and videos of different ways that it's been used, etc., to further their own knowledge. But it's like a sharing of wisdom and experience.
I like that as well, and I want to jump in here and say why, because a lot of what I find in the safety world, this isn't purely only for the safety world, but for specialist areas and professions in general, there's a lot of technical information out there. There's a lot of specific information that's been given about X, Y, and Z. Whether it be elements of compliance, whether it be elements of process safety, whether it be elements of writing documentation, whatever it is. And there's people who have got them, and whether they're academics or practitioners, whatever it is, they become very they see it works for them in their context, and they become very defensive of that viewpoint and that stance, and they become very guarded about anything else. What I love about these questions that you're talking about now, they're meta questions. They are almost context independent. You're talking about how would I approach my board to talk about X, Y, or Z. And some of those other examples that you gave, they're not specific, but they're generic to all organizations. And to Daniel's point as well at the beginning, almost regardless of safety, this is a meta approach, which if you're a 2-man band or you got 2 million employees, whatever it is, you're going to have these same problems, and you're going to want to talk about these same things, and you're going to need to start taking small steps towards that end goal. So having this community, which I know we've got up on the screen at the moment, we've got some areas there where people can ask specific questions, but it's about that support, isn't it? It's about having that support that we talked about gaining that bravery to start taking those small steps and start thinking differently, and start analyzing what it is you need in order to be able to move forward and start making those changes. I really like that, to be honest with you. I think that's great, and I think to your point here as well about being inspired, it does help people maintain that inspiration, especially when they're not alone. And we know the safety world's quite a lonely place. Can be quite a lonely place. You've got all the responsibility and no authority at the best of times. So when you start building in these communities, I think that's a great idea. We spoke as well the other week about some specific examples in relation to how people with these technical knowledge, the specific knowledge in their particular context, how they then change within the organization, how they move roles, how they progress through the organization, and what kind of effect that has on the individuals. Is that a common theme that comes up as well for your audience, for the attendance to your workshops? I think it was the transition from HS manager as a technical role to that of a change manager.
We haven't talked about that one specifically, but we're quite aware that a lot of the people that we meet in these workshops are often technical experts, and they normally gravitate towards best practices and standards and technical solutions to technical problems, really. But a lot of the change that needs to happen within an organization is not really a technical problem to be solved, and we keep approaching it that way, unfortunately. But it's rather an adaptive challenge. It's a human problem rather than a safety problem. And we need to think about that or we need to approach that in quite a different way. And I don't think the safety profession has really been set up to work with change in that kind of way, which is more of this is a challenge for us as humans rather than here's a technical solution. Let's just implement that. So part of what we're doing here is sort of opening up change to be about more about sensing and learning through action and doing things by trying things out and equipping people to sort of step into the unknown. They feel like they can look for best practice or standard, but there is none to be had for these type of change challenges. So we want to build some confidence in people to believe in things, to have a bit of creative confidence to step into that space, and then a few stepping stones so they can actually start generating some expressions for that point of difference and generate some evidence that is actually working. And I think it's a really important notion as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important starting point as well. You can't solve the problem unless you've identified what it is. So being able to actually say, is this a technical problem that we've got? And do we need technical solutions? Or is this an adaptive problem that we've got? And do we need adaptive and creative solutions? Because as you mentioned, you're not going to be effective in trying to fix the adaptive creative problems with technical solutions. Always. I mean, you may have elements of technical solutions that you need, but the tools are quite different, aren't they?
They are, and occasionally I hear stories about how organizations see everything as an adaptive problem, and people disengage because they say, no, this is just give us the solution on how to, manage this particular risk. They don't want to be consulted or, handed over the authorship of all things. So if it is a technical problem, there's no need to go down this whole adaptive challenge solution searching methodology. So there's sort of ditches on either side of this. So just make sure that you understand what type of challenge you have, if it's a sort of technical or an adaptive one, and find solutions or approaches that work for either. It can be quite different.
Yeah, right. Okay. There's one more point I wanted to touch on before we wrap this up, and that was that aspect of command and control. Forcing people to follow the rules as opposed to harnessing the strength within people, so they can create their own improvements. How do organizations go about doing this? This workshop's obviously going to help them identify that they actually have these command and control issues, but how would an organization go about beginning that journey, that small step?
Yeah, nice.
I think often the fear in organizations is, if I'm not doing command and control, or I sort of loosen up the reins a little bit, we're going to have chaos. People are going to be making all sorts of decisions. We're going to have a million different approaches to this, that, and the other, and bad things will happen because nothing's being managed anymore. And I feel like there's just a big anxiety, really, because things still need to be managed and things still need to be controlled. It's just that you're not having the control at the very apex. And we found that by being clear on, well, what exactly is it that we're trying to do here? Are we trying to create feedback loops and mechanisms? Are we trying to reduce production time because of ... Or we've actually got cost pressures that are forcing us into a position where we can't invest in X, Y, and Z. The challenge that you're actually facing as an organization is usually quite specific, and people can usually understand and respect what that challenge actually is. You can't invest in new stuff if you don't have capacity. So you have to create capacity. Asking people to step in with their ideas for something specific is quite easy to do. There's also always constraints. Constraints might be around employment law and what that enables an organization to do. There might be to do with cost pressures, resource availability. And when you're trying to sort of step forward in an adaptive challenge or stepping away from command and control, the organization still has these constraints to work within. And being more sort of open or public about what those constraints are, essentially just create a little box that you're inviting people into to help solve the problem. And this is very different from the floodgates are open and chaos is erupting. It's you get to choose the problem.
Armageddon's on the way.
Yeah, you get to be clear on the constraints that we all have to work within. And we found that people are quite receptive to those. They respect that that's the case for many organizations. And, really, it's like if you're organizing a holiday, you've got to choose where to go, but, you've only got this much time off, that much money, and, my other half doesn't like doing half the things that I want to do. You've always got the constraints that you're working with. They remain true, but you're just making them owned by everybody so that everybody has limitations to work within and start to contribute. And then you actually have a process to manage, or a set of information for everybody to join in and manage. Which is not chaos. It's not floodgates opening, but it's actually getting more brains, more minds onto the problem that you have at hand, which I'd argue most organizations would want that available.
Yeah, same. It reminds me, actually, I'm in the middle, just started watching. This is completely off topic, but it's related, so bear with me. just started watching a Netflix series about this prison in America, high risk prison in America, several hundred inmates, all there for stuff that you really don't want people to be out on the streets doing. And the marshal, the sheriff, whatever he's called, the person in charge of this prison, spent a good couple of years putting together this program and this plan for, instead of having these prisoners locked down for 23 hours a day, giving them free reign of the wing that they're in, removing some of the restrictions and the wardens that are there as well, and giving the responsibility for acting and behaving properly back to the prisoners. And it's a fascinating experiment, and I don't know how it ends up. I could be preempting Armageddon here, to be honest. I could be saying this, and I get a couple of hours down the track and go, oh damn, that didn't go well, maybe that wasn't a good thing to talk about. But this is this sounds similar. You've got this very restrictive environments whereby we hire fabulous, intelligent, capable, motivated people, and then we stick them in these boxes and we go, this is the way you're going to do it. You're not going to do it any other way. And we don't allow them to explore and to have those failings as well as those successes as well, for fear that things will get out of control. And I hear you. And it's going to take brave leaders. I think brave leaders with vision, contemporary, courageous leaders to go, let's open the doors, let's let the prisoners out of their cell blocks and give them their autonomy back and give them the creativity and capability to actually bring a piece of themselves and help us all solve problems together, as opposed to, everything being siloed, not just in a department, but actually in down to the individual as well. You get individuals siloed and no, that's not your job, that's not your remit, stick with this, that's the rules, blah, blah, blah. Let's open that up a bit more and see how much cognitive capability we can get flowing throughout the organization. How many problems we can solve then? I mean, wouldn't that be a great problem to have, solving too many problems?
I think this is the nuance here, that the goal is not to get rid of command and control. The goal is to harness the human potential that is currently being held back, right? So the goal is to sort of, how can we capture the motivation, the insights, the wisdom, the power of our people? And when that is your question, well, then you start thinking about, well, how do we listen to people? How do we get better questions? How do we connect them up? How do we give them a space to sort of work things out, really? So the end goal is not to get rid of command and control. That's sort of a byproduct of going after what you want. So being clear on what good looks like and the good stuff that you're after is sort of that's what needs
to be being clear on what you want to achieve, and then what's getting in the way of that, and then sort of addressing those issues, which, as you mentioned, the byproduct may be a reduction in that command and control element as well.
I kind of want to challenge as well that this needs courageous leaders, because I just think it needs curious or open ones, because at the end of the day, this whole micro experiment thing, start small, is if you're really afraid of what might happen in your organization, pick something really small where you can test the moon. And that allows you to be within your risk appetite, even if it's like your anxiety appetite rather than your more formal one. But it lets you see what happens. You might learn something about your own organization, right? Perhaps the communication channels or the way that targeting, etc., is managed is also undermining things. But by starting small, it lets you learn what a good next step would be, and then it can grow at the speed of everybody's ability to trust each other with what's happening. And I think that's where you start to come. What specifically are we trying to resolve here? I come back to my Arctic story, and we had a very explicit set of instructions about how everybody was going to be trained in firearms to shoot bears. And perhaps what we needed was there's a really big hazard, and there are substantial risks around them. These are the tools available to you. and then we can create something that's meaningful for us. We're still getting the right guidance. We know what's important and why, but we're actually being invited in to think about how best to organize ourselves to do it.
Yeah.
Or our risk assessment example from earlier, job-specific risk assessments turn into a conversation about preparing for uncertainty. It's a very small thing. That's like a 10-minute conversation that happens at the start of many days or every few days that you could just run that differently once with a little review at the smoko break at lunchtime to see what difference has happened that occurred. And it starts to build trust in, we put this issue forward, there are these constraints and parameters, but we learned this. What might we do next?
Yeah.
And that's openness. I don't think that's courageous. I think that's just being open.
That's a fair point. Maybe a bit of both. Curiosity and courageousness. I don't think. See, I've got curiosity all over my website. It's one of my favorite words because I think it leads to so many great places, and potentially bad places as well. But you have to have that curiosity to start the conversation at least, and to think that there may be an alternative. There could be a better way of doing things. So I think curiosity is definitely a skill set which is highly underrated within organizations. And when I meet people on my channel, I come across and they say, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know why. I just know that there's a better way of doing this, and I know I want to try, and I know I need to, because this can't be the only way. There's got to be something more. There's got to be something better. There's got to be something different. And that's such a great place to start from, because you don't necessarily need to know where you're going to know that where you're at is not ideal, and it's got a lot of flaws. But understanding what those flaws are, and that potentially there is a better place to be heading towards, such a great power, such a great skill for people to have as well. So we've got this workshop coming up 24th of July in Brisbane, in Queensland. Are there any plans for any more in Australia, any more anywhere else around the world, or is this your toe dipping outside of New Zealand?
There are no plans at this stage. This is toe dipping. There's an intention and a desirability to, if things go well, and this appetite to build it more. That the West Island is not very far away.
It's not. It's not. Awesome, gentlemen. Well, thank you very much. Did we cover everything we needed to cover for this chat? I think we did, didn't we? We got dates out there. I'm going to put all the links. The link to this webpage I've been showing you, that's going to be down the bottom as well. If it's all right with Daniel and with Rob, I'll also put in links to their LinkedIn profiles and to their organization as well, their Open Change company. I'll put the link down the bottom as well, so you can go straight to their website and have a look at the services they offer. Have a look at some of the clients I've worked with, and more detailed information there on what they provide. So all those links will be provided in the description below. And is there anything we missed?
There's always more things to talk about, David.
There is.
So we'll set up another chat and talk about something else.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm always up for that.
Cool.
But for this, at the moment, I think we've pretty much covered our bases. So if you're in Australia and you like what you hear, or even if you're not in Australia, fly in. Flights are cheaper at the moment. Come on in. Come to New Zealand. You can go to New Zealand as well and see one of the workshops over there. But come to Australia and go to Brisbane for the 24th of July and catch up with Rob and Daniel to go over their safety recrafted workshop. And I'm sure there'll be lots to learn and lots of insights and lots of people to meet as well. Talk about your own journeys with them. Thank you so much for your time, Rob and Daniel. Very much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, David.
Thanks,
and if I'm over there, I'm not sure whether I will be, but if I am, I might sneak in the back door.
Look forward to it. Right.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
So that was Rob and Daniel talking about their up-and-coming Safety Recrafted workshop in Brisbane. So if you're in town, please go along and learn from Daniel and Rob as to how you can start moving the dial in these areas with your organization. Micro experiments, empowering people, everything we've been speaking about in this talk. Thank you again, and see you in the next podcast.